Good evening. My name is Winston Moore. I'm chairman of the Anglo-Bolivian Society. Our society would like to extend a warm welcome to Sarah Abdoo to give a presentation about her work with Adelante Mujer, empowering abused women in Cochabamba. So the introduction is going to be made by Kate Ford, but welcome, Sarah, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Nice to have you all here, and hello to Sarah particularly. Sarah arrived in Bolivia from Argentina in 2019, knowing almost nothing of Bolivian culture and planning to stay for 3 months. But however, already interested in the idea of social tourism, she began to think of developing a project in which socioeconomically deprived local people could share their culture with tourists. As she became aware of Bolivia's gender inequality and the prevalence of violence in the home, the idea developed to become one of empowering victims of domestic abuse by offering them an opportunity to share pre-existing and newly acquired skills and their lived experience with people who, on the surface, would appear to have more, but in reality lacked something the women could offer. Adelante Mujer was formed, and the cooking workshops for tourists began, taught by women who were being mentored by Adelante Mujer. And as the many plaudits online from Bolivians and from tourists from North America, Chile, Germany, France, and the UK show, it is working. When the opportunity arose of acquiring a space in Cochabamba where mentoring workshops and events could take place, the benefits of this reciprocity became even more apparent. The joint efforts of organizers and clients were what made it work, and the absence of a savior ethos encourages users to draw on their own skills and resources. And so I'd like to hand over to Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Winston, for the warm welcome. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here today with you and to share a little bit more about what Adelante Mujer do and what our purpose is here in Cochabamba, Bolivia. Just a housekeeping thing, can I be heard okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Alberto, do you want to share the...
Beginning now.
Okay.
So we're going to do this. Here, there you are. You can begin, Sarah.
Wonderful, thank you. So this is just a first slide is actually a photograph of our first graduation of the women who have been through Summa Causa, which is our 8-month program, which I'll explain a little bit further on in the presentation. And it's a photo of our community and all the people that support us, and also all the women who went through the first pilot of the program that we ran. So I just wanted to explain that. So we can move on to the first slide now. Winston. Oh, sorry, Alberto. Thank you. Cool. So before I explain more in depth about Adelante Mujer, I was asked to give a brief introduction on myself, who I am and how Adelante Mujer was born. One second, do you think we can go up, because I can't see a very big version of what's written. Thanks. So after finishing my degree of psychology and philosophy at university, I took a little bit of time out to travel around South America specifically. And whilst I was traveling, I noticed that there weren't that many opportunities for tourists or travelers to connect with local communities and especially disadvantaged communities to really have an authentic and real experience of the country that they were in, traveling around, exploring. And I noticed that in many of the countries that I was traveling through, a big part of the culture was based around the food and the gastronomy and the local traditions based on the gastronomy of that country. So I thought it would be interesting to create a concept that connected tourists and travelers to local communities through the lens of gastronomy. And I also, having studied and worked closely with 12-step concepts, saw the healing power of teaching and the healing power of sharing one's experience with others. And through both of those ideas and linking them, thought it would be interesting to create cooking workshops run by women in who've been through difficult situations, in vulnerable socioeconomic situations, to empower them, their communities, and also to give tourists, travelers, a real and in-depth experience, cultural experience of the country that they were in. When I arrived in Bolivia, that dream and that idea came to fruition when I was working in a non-profit that worked with art therapy at the time and is now closed. And I mentioned the idea to them, and they said, sounds pretty interesting. Why don't you give it a go with the group of women who we work with, who are actually mothers of children who had terminal cancer, who were obviously in vulnerable emotional situations, but also economically, also had economic difficulties at the time. So it was very, very organic. I started getting groups of travelers, tourists together, then also talked to the women. We came up with some ideas of different recipes that we could teach: chakchu, sopa de maní, all of the classics, pique, salteñas, tucumanas. So we started doing these workshops with the women, and it was pretty interesting how it worked, because the women absolutely loved it, and it became evident to me that it was a very healing exchange. You know, they were able to get out of their day-to-day suffering, stress for a couple of hours and just be in the spotlight, share what they knew, which many times they've been taught by their grandmothers, their mothers. It's wisdom that obviously has been handed down through generations, as often traditional recipes are. And they were able to share that with travelers who also gave a lot of value to what they were being taught. And that in turn gave the women a sense of their own value. So I became quite excited by this idea, and the nonprofit that I was sharing the idea with closed, and I then wondered what would happen if I approached safe houses and governmental institutions that work with women who'd been through domestic violence, and asked them if they would be interested in working with me and the concept with the women that they housed. And so I started doing that with very little idea of what Adelante Mujer would become later on. And that is how it all started. So I think that's a little bit about me and how the idea was born. And now I'll talk a little bit more about where we're at today. Can we move to the next slide, Alberto? Thank you. So who are we and what point are we at today? So now we are a registered nonprofit organization, registered fundación in Bolivia, in Cochabamba. So we're not at a national level, we're at a nivel departamental, departmental level. And we became a registered nonprofit in 2018. So we support women who have been through episodes of violence in order to recover emotionally, empower themselves economically, and then become sources of inspiration for the next generation of women who are going through similar things. So the part about the women who have been through our program being sources of inspiration for the next generation is part of the reason why we have a graduation process. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. So I wrote a little bit about our vision, so I'll just read that out loud. So we believe that every woman has the potential to transform their pain, suffering, and isolation into lives of community, joy, economic, and emotional independence. And I'll speak a little bit more about community later on in the presentation, because that's definitely one of the values that we consider to be the most important part of our philosophy at Adelante Mujer. And the other important point to mention is that when a woman comes to the doors of the Warmi Wasi, which is our home, instead of trying to give them more skills or give them more develop them more personally, we try to work with whatever they already know. So the tools that they already have, the strength that is already within them, and help them to connect to that strength. So that the idea is, in Spanish, we call it not being an asistencialista organization, which is basically the idea is instead of giving the women the solution to their problems, giving them the tools to solve those problems and to move forward to achieve that emotional stability and economic empowerment. So I'll explain a little bit more about how we achieve the emotional recovery and economic empowerment a little bit later on. Obviously, we don't expect that the women will be perfectly healed at the end of the process that we work with them. That would be probably impossible because they have wounds, we all have wounds that don't get solved through an 8-month program. However, what we seek to achieve is that they are at a point of stability, which they can share with others, can be a source of inspiration for others, and that then impacts their own lives and the lives of their families. So I mentioned then on the other side of the slide that 7 out of every 10 women in Bolivia do suffer from some form of violence. It is a machista culture, as I'm sure you will all know. But the main factors we have detected as contributing to these to the forms of violence that the women go through, firstly, economic dependence, lack of self-worth, and lack of support networks. So I'm going to talk a little bit later on about how we address each of those factors. And then one sec, I'm realizing I don't have the it's here, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Thank you. Sorry, 1 second, technical issue. Oh no, okay, I'm going to talk about that now then. Sorry, I thought it was later down in the presentation. So yeah, so when I talk about the how we address the issue of lack of skill set and the economic dependence part, I will talk a little bit later about Sumak Kausai, which is our program, our 8-month program that we run for the women. So every 8 months, 30 to 35 women can go through the 8-month program that we run, which is basically broken down into 4 phases, which I will explain a little bit later on. But the third and fourth phase that we work on within the Sumak Kausai program addresses tools that will help the women gain that economic independence. So we talk about finances, managing our finances, how to write a CV, how to get a job, how to go to a job interview, if they're interested in setting up their own enterprise and being an entrepreneur, how to write a business plan, to do a financial plan for that business plan, how to get seed capital, etc. And so, yeah, there is a large focus, there's a strong focus on economic independence. And then the other way that we do address economic independence is to try and involve the women that most need it in our catering service and our cooking workshops, to guide cooking workshops. So in order for them to, while they're getting on their feet and while they're going through this 8-month program, to have a little bit of economic independence and to not fall back into cycles of violence, we offer them those opportunities to get involved in income generation within the project, which I'll explain a little bit more later on. So in terms of lack of self-belief and self-worth, yeah, as I mentioned before, when I talked about the cooking workshops, the idea is revaluing what they already know, revaluing the skills they have, revaluing how they see themselves in the world as mothers, as sisters, as workers, as potential entrepreneurs. So we also try to kind of capture the skills that they have and utilize those skills in the house. So for example, the women who know how to sew and to do corte en confección. Some of those women, we then buy their products and we'll sell them in an international market, or we'll post their enterprises on our platform. So really trying to boost their awareness of the skills and the potential that they already have. And then obviously as part of the 8-month program, we also work on self-esteem. There are workshops that we run with therapists, workshops that we run with coaches, so that the women are aware of the value that they do have, and also their rights as women in the community. So lack of support networks, as I mentioned, community is a very strong value that we work within the nonprofit. So within the activities that the nonprofit offers, for example, within the catering service, within Sumak Kausai, in their own personal lives in general, we try to foment those friendships within, between the women. And I think one of the biggest factors for the women who have graduated and the women who are now going through the program is that when they are together, they do feel like they're in a sisterhood, in a family. They make friends with each other. When they've got a problem, they have someone to call, and they are a team because they're obviously working together, bringing value to themselves, bringing value to the nonprofit through the enterprises that we have. So there's teamwork, there's friendship, there's sisterhood, there's mutual support. There's obviously a therapist who they can go to. So yeah, the support networks is an extremely strong part of what we offer. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So this is a little bit of a timeline of what we've kind of been through over the last couple of years, 3 years, actually 4 years, because they were through it since. So 3 years ago, we became a registered nonprofit, but we kind of started building about four and a half years ago. So as I mentioned, started with the cooking workshops with the women from the safe houses. Then we started to get different chefs involved, and we started to do kind of gastronomic gourmet events around Cochabamba and different places. That led to us needing to establish a headquarters because we were doing so many different things into so many different places. The community was growing. We needed to find a space. So we ended up in a Warmiwasi, which is where we are today. And which is a very odd but very cool architectural design. It's kind of bubbles, spaceship sort of vibe. If any of you come to Cochabamba, you're welcome to come and visit us. And then we became a registered nonprofit. We then set up the catering service that we now run, which is a catering service with a very strong vegan, vegetarian, healthy focus. So it's a sort of, that's our punto de diferenciación for our clients. And we generally have clients who are other nonprofits who need to order different lunches or snacks for their workshops that they host for their employees and other events as well. And then we introduced the therapies, so the one-to-one therapies, and started working with different organizations that offered sort of group therapies, workshops. And so we started kind of moving into the therapeutic area of work. And then we launched the first version of Suma Causai, which is, as I explained, our 8-month program. We launched Suma Causai as a pilot last year with 25 women who were already more or less involved in the project, and some, it was half women who were already involved and half women who were coming to the project for the first time. But yeah, so we did the pilot last year, and this year we are doing our first proper version of that program, and we have 36 women involved this year. So we're growing with the number of women who we are catering to. So that is a little bit of a timeline. Now we can go to the next slide. Oh yeah, thank you. So yeah, the first, I wanted to kind of mention a few things that make us stand out from other nonprofits, governmental, non-governmental organizations in Cochabamba and in Bolivia, because we realized with the team when we started doing like a process of who are we and what are our values and what are our what's our mission and our vision, that actually instead of being a non-profit, we're more like a community, and the value of community kind of is at the heart of everything we do, and we try to make decisions based on this concept of community. And community, the community of Adelante Mujer is not just the women, the group that we're working with at the time. It composes the group of women, it composes the graduates from last year, it composes all the people that help us with the program Suma Causai. Every week, every Thursday, there's a different volunteer who comes to facilitate the workshop that we're giving that week. It's our team, it's our therapist, it's our operative assistant, it's me, it's all the friends of the project who come and help us with bits and bobs around the house. It's chefs who come and give cooking capacitaciones to, sorry, I'm going to use a few Spanish words that sometimes are a bit difficult to translate for me. Come and give cooking classes to the women. So the community is large, and I think that's part of the reason why we have been able to do so much in 5 years, is that we have had so many people who have really wanted to help out. And I'll explain a little bit more about our network in a little bit further on in the presentation. So yeah, great. Another point that I'd written down that I just wanted to share about community is how important it is for the women to feel like they're part of a community and something bigger, because this sense of identity, identification, belonging, which few of the women have felt before they come to the house, is really important. So that feeling of when they walk through the door of the house, just being in a family, being amongst other women who have been through the same thing, with the children, with the team, with our friends, is a really important factor to come out of isolation for us. Then I mentioned self-sustainability. So yeah, this kind of self-sustainability the concept can be applied to a few of the different aspects of the way that we work, but and I'll explain a little bit further on in the presentation again how our finances work. But the way that we try and sustain the nonprofit is partly through the enterprises that we have. So, for example, some of the women make artisanal products of very high quality. We sell those in international market. That helps sustain everything that we do within the nonprofit. The women who give cooking workshops, also the rest of the money that comes in goes towards the therapies of their sisters, essentially. And there are other, elements, the catering service. Sometimes we host fairs in the house. So there are little things that we do that do generate income that makes the nonprofit keep running. And it's really interesting that the women are actually involved in that income generation, because it makes them feel part of that effort, and part of the existence of the nonprofit depends on all of us doing our bit. So that kind of then comes into feeds into the value of being a community as well. And I think about me, because obviously when I'm working in a catering service, I'm earning money, but it's not just me I'm earning money for, it's for the rest of the community as well. So I think that's an important part of what we do. And it also means that if the other sources of income that we have don't work out, then we'd still have the cooking workshops, we still have the catering service, it will still work. So instead of depending on an external source of funding, we do have our own ways of generating income as well. And obviously the women, when they come up with an idea, or we want to do this as well, absolutely, we talk about it and we go for it. So yeah, okay, great. And then the last one is humility. So we realized that when we discuss this value as a team, we realized that it was important to include, because it is something that we consider when we make decisions, for example, in nonprofit. So when we do induction days for our facilitators, when we host induction days, to explain to them how we interact with the women, what our philosophy is, we always talk about humility, because we believe that the women aren't the only ones who are going through this process of healing and growing and learning their boundaries and becoming economically independent. We all have inner work to do. The facilitators, me, the therapist, the coordinator, everyone. And so as much as we and the facilitators are sharing their knowledge and sharing their wisdom and experience with the women, they are also learning a lot from the women's realities, from their own feedback as well. So what did the women think of the workshop? What could have been better? And we're actually at the moment focusing a lot on feedback and evaluations, and what are the participants of the workshops, what are the women getting out of this, and what do they think could be better? And so I think listening is, I suppose, listening and humility are a big part of how we grow as a nonprofit. So yeah, that's humility. Okay, we can go on to the next slide now. So this is a little bit about how, what our model looks like, our financial model looks like. So as I mentioned, we try to be as self-sustaining as we can. And in the future, what I'm really hoping to do is improve the sales of the artisanal products that the women make in the UK, internationally, so that can compose a greater chunk of how our income is generated. And we also do have some partners who donate to us for corporate social responsibility reasons, which is lovely. We have a few donations, which is 14%, and then our cooking workshops and catering bring in about 36%. So right now, that's roughly how the model works. And if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them at the end. And we can go on to the next one. Next slide. Okay. I'm sorry, 1 second, I'm a bit slow. Okay, there we go. So when I was thinking about impact, and when we talk about impact with the team, we generally look at 3 indicators, which for us demonstrate the impact that our program has had on the women who've graduated. As I mentioned, and I'll just quickly briefly explain the 4 phases of the program. So the first phase is specifically deals with emotional recovery and healing. So in that phase, which is 2 months long, every Thursday, a facilitator comes to the house to give a workshop. And it can be as varied as a meditation teacher to a conscious movement bodywork teacher. We also have theatre, women or facilitators who work with theatre and acting, and then therapists, coaches, just thinking about all the different workshops that we've been through already. And in that phase, we really look at who am I, what are my needs, what's happened, what are the patterns that have led to me being in and staying in violent, toxic relationships. Where am I not? Where am I not putting my boundaries down and valuing myself? All of those kinds of things we look at. For example, this week we have 2 people from an institution that work with formación integral terapéutico, therapeutic, integral, holistic formación training, who will be giving a workshop on the difference between apego positivo y apego negativo. So positive attachment, negative attachment, positive relationship, negative relationship. What is a sign of a toxicity? What is a sign of, so giving them also tools to navigate those kinds of relationships and issues that come up in relationships, and the awareness, of what it means to be in a toxic dynamic. So that's the first phase, that's 2 months, and then the second phase is another 2 months, and in the second phase we really look at the women's plan de vida, their sueños, their dreams, their ideas for the future, things that they've always wanted to do with their lives but never have got round to doing, or have never taken steps towards doing because of the fear, because of the lack of self-worth, because of the toxicity in their relationships that just kept them on a very low level of depression, of anxiety, and unable to take steps towards their dreams or their ambitions. So we work with coaches, a lot of coaches around dreams ideas, plans. And then in the third section, the third phase of the program, we look at tools, so practical tools that are needed to take those steps towards their plans, ambitions, dreams. So we'll look at, some of them are interested in setting up enterprises, little businesses. We look at what a business plan would look like. We look at financial plans, what realistically would need to happen for this dream, for this plan, for this ambition to be realized. And so we work on with entrepreneurs, professionals in digital marketing who can actually help the women use social media platforms to promote their products, for example, that they already have but aren't really doing much to promote or aren't doing really much to sell. Marketing people. We work with financial advisors who can help the women look at the numbers, for example, business plans, and then other women who want to get a job, for example. We look at CVs, we look at their work rights, we look at how to show up for a job interview, personal image, all of those kinds of things. So that's the third section. And the fourth section is accompaniment phase. So we really, in that phase, it's really just kind of holding their hands and running through all the steps that we've been through in the last 3 months to help them to put all of that into practice, all of what we've been through. As I said, we've done the pilot phase, and now we are doing the first proper version. So we kind of hemos pulido, we polished a lot of the aspects that weren't working in the first phase, and now we just hope to keep continuing and growing and improving the program. So as I talked about, we look at 3 indicators which demonstrate the impact that the program has had on the women. One is the women's presence in the community and willingness to be ambassadors and give back to the next generation of women. So it's really, really important that the women who have been through the program and who now have a level of stability, emotional stability, economic stability, can actually be spokespeople for the message of Adelante Mujer, and can also inspire the next generation. So we always want, on the Thursdays when we have Suma Causa in the house, for the graduates of the last generation to be around, to be able to ask any questions, to be able to kind of give a word of inspiration, of hope, sometimes share their stories with the women, but just to be around as positive role models, essentially, that they show resilience and awareness of their value within society as women, mothers, workers, etc. It's interesting to see how, when the women who have graduated interact with the new generation of women, the difference in their attitude towards life in general, towards themselves, towards their value. Often they'll sort of, I'll hear them be chatting in the kitchen, and they'll say, you know, I once was in your position, it's all going to be okay. Just, you know, stick it out, it's going to be fine. We've got all of us to talk to. And it really is amazing hearing them share that. And for me, that is an indicator of the success of the program. Also, you know, the way that they interact with their children is so much more gentle, because often, you know, the violence that they have received is also passed on in their relationships with their children, and that really shifts as they go through the program, and as they then are able to share their experience with the next generation. And yeah, lastly, the ability to express the transformation that they have gone through. So not just with the other women, but we also participate in, that's not the right word, but sometimes they're asked to give their testimonies to the press or to local TV station, and they will go themselves because they really do want to share the message with other women and talk about, communicate what they've been through. We try to ask them to kind of talk about their own experience, so that, thank you, so that, yeah, their story is shared for themselves and not relate it so much to the nonprofit, because yeah, it's important that that they're sharing their individual journey. So we also need to be careful about what's the word, anonymity. So it's important, if they want to do that, that they do that for themselves. But yeah, that ability to express their path, their journey is important for us. And in the graduation process that we also have at the end of Summa Causae, they give their testimony. They talk about their journey of transformation, and the people who have been in giving the workshops, facilitating the workshops within Summa Causae are there to cheer them on at the end, and to just acknowledge that process. So as I mentioned, last year we ran the first pilot with 25 women. 12 out of those 25 women, we kind of gave the not the label, what's this? We named graduates. Why 12? Because there were more women who were kind of showing up for the workshops, who we consider to be part of our community, and obviously very important to us. You know, their well-being is extremely important to us. But 12 of the women, you know, consistently showed up for the workshops. 12 of the women committed to a process of one-to-one therapy throughout those 8 months. 12 of the women were able to, you know, get up in front of an audience and actually share and express their process and the journey that they've been on. And those 12 women we now trust can be ambassadors for the next generation. So it's a responsibility. We talk about the responsibility of those graduates to be able to hold the torch for the next generation. Some of the women who didn't end up graduating because they kind of joined like at the end, or they kind of found us late, or they weren't that interested in one-to-one therapy process throughout the whole 8 months, and there are different factors, but they have chosen to come from the beginning this time, and so we hope that this time that they will finish, and we're excited because there are 36 women who have started the program this year. We're hoping about 20 of them will graduate. So yeah, it's exciting because we are growing. Okay, so the next slide. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention a couple of the women who are graduates and who are now holding the torch for the next generation and where they're at now. So Alicia is one of the women who went through Summa Causae, who graduated, and she regularly comes in to guide cooking workshops, to welcome the new generation of women, to share her experience with them. She also often has worked different opportunities outside the project, that if the women don't have work, she can offer them contacts in different cafes that she's working for at the moment. Often they take on new women in the community, and she really does embody the values of Adelante Mujer. She is very emotionally resilient, economically self-sufficient. She's now setting up her own enterprise, which she wants to involve the women in later on, and offer them work. She did a course in reposteria and panaderia, and yeah, she's constantly improving her skills, constantly teaching the new women recipes. So yeah, she's absolutely embodies for us the values of Adelante Mujer and is an ambassador. And then Jadira, who, when she graduated from the program, she was awarded a scholarship to become a certified life coach. she achieved that. She got her certifications, and she then decided to restart her career as a therapist, because she was a therapist before the period of violence that she went through just got her on her knees emotionally, and she couldn't work. And so she restarted her career, and she then became very passionate about supporting a lot of the activities that we ran at Adelante Mujer. She wanted to support a lot of the women, and we just saw great leadership potential in her, and an ability to motivate the women, serve as a role model for them. So we invited her to be part of the coordination team for this year. And so she's now our operative assistant. She helps with everyday functions of the nonprofit, and she's kind of organizing the next generation of women. So we really try to foment all of those leadership skills that the women have. And obviously there are more graduates that I could talk about, but yeah, just for time reasons, I'll leave it at that for today. Hola. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, 1 second. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. On to the next slide. Oh, I think I just talked about, okay, well, I hope you saw the slide on Jadida. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about our networks and how we pull all of the different aspects together of Adelante Mujer. So the programs, the therapies, the cooking workshops, the catering service, everything that we've done has been thanks to the team and our network that has just continually grown and developed over the years. So the Sumak Kausai, which is the program we run, the team that are involved in setting up Sumak Kausai, a variety of entrepreneurs, coaches, therapists, they call their network to come and give different workshops, facilitate different workshops within Sumak Kausai. So we have spiritual leaders who come and give workshops, meditation teachers, as I said, people who work with theatre, people who work with body work. It's an enormous array of professionals who support us. And obviously lawyers who come in to talk about the rights of the women. We also have a legal team who support us pro bono as the board of directors of the nonprofit. We have volunteers who come in and work with the children every Thursday. We have chefs who come in and give the women tools in cooking. From sort of keto workshops, vegan workshops, all kinds of things. Different chefs and cooks have come in to teach the women. Then, as I mentioned, we have life coaches and therapists, the healing arts and creative expression. Then we have people who support us, on the corporate social responsibility side of things with our funding. Then we have the tourists and the travelers who come and take cooking workshops with the women. So that's an incredible support to us and the women. And we have our donors, we have our international consumers of the artisanal products in the UK, in the US. We have the clients who contract our catering service. And then I mentioned we have entrepreneurs, childcare. I mean, there are so many people who support us and really have allowed us to thrive as a nonprofit. So yeah, there's always something that our network can get involved in, and always people, luckily and very grateful for this, knocking on our door and saying, how can we help? A dentist, for example, wrote to me the other day and said he wanted to offer free dental treatment to the women. So yeah, the challenge is kind of coordinating all of that sometimes. But yeah, it's extremely helpful, and I'm very grateful for all the support that we do get. So a little bit about how the women find us. Firstly, social media and word of mouth are extremely important tools. Oh no, sorry, we have to go to the next slide, Alberto. Huh? We have. Oh yeah, I think we're nearly done. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Alberto. So social media and word of mouth are extremely important tools for us in recruiting the next generation of women. Word of mouth is just the women who are already involved, speaking to their friends, speaking to their family. We once had one woman come to the workshops that we run, and then the next week her mother was there, and then the next week her sister was there. So yeah, it's definitely one of the ways that we get the message out there. And then social media is also really important. So we have quite a strong social media presence, and the women always share our posts and our invitations to different workshops and different activities we're running with their friends, with their family, so to get involved, get different people involved. And women do hear about us through social media. And then we have different partnerships with governmental and non-governmental institutions and organizations. So we have partnerships with safe houses that bring the women that they work with to the project every week on a Thursday. We don't work with them with one-to-one therapies because they already have that within their organization. But we do work with them on Thursdays within the context of the program Suma Causa. And I think one of the most important things for the women who come from safe houses is just to get a feeling of community and family, and women who have been through a similar thing but are moving forward, because in safe houses generally they're only allowed to stay from 3 to maximum 6 months. And so there aren't that many people around that are there to be a source of inspiration for them. And then partnerships with non-governmental organizations, for example, Save the Children, IFI, which is Instituto de Formación Femenino Integral, CAM, el Centro de Atención a la Mujer, Aldeas Infantiles SOS, I mentioned Save the Children, and there are many more as well that we have partnerships with. They know about us. They sometimes nos derivan mujeres with whom they work with. And we also, if we receive a woman who has a very urgent issue, is in a very vulnerable situation, we do have the possibility to contact that safe house or another institution para derivarlos a su institución. So it's very, very helpful having those allies. And the other thing is that we don't address the legal cases of the women because we don't have the staff to do that as well. But there are organizations who offer free legal support and counseling, and other organizations who actually sponsor the women's el seguimiento de sus casos. So we could have the possibility to contact them as well to help the women with the legal side of their cases, if they do decide to hacer la denuncia, hacer la denuncia in English. I'm not sure how to, but I hope you guys understand. So the other point that I wanted to mention was that the holistic approach that we offer, I think is quite unique, and I think that's why different non-profit organizations send women over to us to work with them with their Suma Causa. And yeah, they're just components that other organizations, sometimes because of the traditional structure, don't work with. For example, meditation, spiritual healers, because we're very open to different approaches. So that's quite nice that we can complement different organizations with what they want to offer. the women, with what they can offer the women. So I just wanted to mention a couple of the challenges. Can we go on to the next slide? Roberto, thanks. A few of the challenges that we, oh, bless you, salud. A few of the challenges that we come across when working in Adelante Mujer. One of them are the cultural nuances that involve kind of punctuality, consistency, showing up for the program. I think this isn't a challenge that is going to go away because because of the nature, you know, of a lot of the women and that kind of the women's personal circumstances, and that kind of leads me on to the next point, which is obviously a lot of the women are single mothers. Their kids are their priority. They can obviously bring their children to Thursday workshops because they're a childminders to look after them. However, if the circumstances dictate that day they need to work and they have a job offer and they need to generate income, then they can't come. You know, they can't come to the workshops. And we as the team really need to understand that and to have some compassion, you know, for their situation, understand that, okay, their priority is, in this case, to generate income for their family. So, you know, for those women who also need it the most, we try and involve them as much as possible in income generating activities done in the house and the project, which I think is another thing that draws a lot of women to the nonprofit, that, you know, there are opportunities to generate income, as well as heal, as well as work on their planes de vida. The other challenge that I think is quite important to mention is communication, group collaboration. When we're working with the women, a lot of times in the past and still today, we have to remember that we're working with a group who have a lot of emotional wounds, and sometimes can be triggered very easily. So there's a certain care, con cuidado que tenemos que tener when we're taking into account how we communicate and how we give feedback. And I think that's something that you know, over time we've become much stronger as a team in delivering a better communication. But sometimes between the women themselves there can be roces, there can be problems, arguments, and that can really affect the nonprofit as a whole. There can be rumors, gossip, and so we really try and reaffirm as a team and speak to the women about, you know, what is healthy communication when problems arise, when problems come up. How can we solve those in a healthy way? You know, what are the channels of communication? What are the options? You know, we have a therapist. We have communication challenges. And also, as I mentioned, the induction workshops that we run for our facilitators, it's super important to talk about language, because there can be some, you know, just very subtle things like when they say, you know, you guys need to ... versus we, you know, as women need to, or we all need to, is a really big difference in how language affects how the women take on board the concepts that are being shared. So then setting expectations of what we offer. So as I mentioned, we try and develop a culture of non-asistencialismo, so to give the women the support so hang on, I always get this wrong. So not giving them the solutions, their problems, giving them the tools to address their problems. to set them their own path and their own goals. I think that there is a sense sometimes that being a non-profit, we should when push comes to shove, give them money. We have been asked many times, why don't you give me money when I have a health problem? And we've had to set those expectations from the beginning, because we don't want that to be the message. If we are a self-sufficient non-profit and that's our model and that's what we aspire to, we also, you know, want the women to try and be self-sufficient. And yeah, it's not our philosophy to just hand out money or hand out resources. What we try to do to get around that is to offer income generation opportunities for them. So sometimes that really helps, because they might say, you know, I have an operation, or I have to fund this. Can I please come in and work on this specific catering service? And that's useful to us because we can offer them that opportunity without being assistencialista and handing out money, because it's not the message that we want to convey. So setting expectations is really important. However, I will mention at the end of this part on challenges an aspect that we do want to improve with regards to funding. Infrastructure, yeah. So as we do have a strong focus on self-sustainability, there are certain aspects that just aren't good enough. Like we don't have a printer, we don't have a computer, you know, everything's kind of based, try and do it on WhatsApp, phones, sort of laptops, but it's all a bit unprofessional at the moment, and it really would help the daily kind of the functions of the non-profit flow and just be more organized if we were able to have better infrastructure. And the last thing is that, yes, when we talk in Summa Causa about entrepreneurship and setting up an enterprise and doing a business plan, it is a little bit frustrating at the end when they graduate, because I would love to be able to say, oh, now here is the seed capital that you can invest in your new enterprise, or that you can invest in, you know, an oven to bake your empanadas that you're going to sell. It feels, yeah, it feels like if we're rewarding the commitment that these women have given to the program by you know, this graduation, holding this graduation ceremony, it really would fit the bill if we were able to give them that seed capital to motivate them also to complete the course. But yeah, if we have that strong focus on entrepreneurship, yeah, it would feel so much better to me to be able to give them that seed capital. And that step right now is not there. So overcoming these challenges, let's go to the next slide, Alberto, please. Yeah, so yeah, as I talked about, the personal circumstances of the women sometimes involve working rather than being in the Thursday workshops that we run. At the same time, when they do work, a lot of the places that they have job interviews at or apply to work and won't allow them to be there with their kids, and a lot of them have very young kids, children. So what we would love to be able to provide is childcare, and in the future to have a nursery so that the women could come and drop off their kids in the morning, go to work and pick them up at the end of the day. There are state nurseries, but it would be an incredible service to the women whose family is already Adelante Mujer, to be able to confide in us in that way. So have a bit of capital to spend on childcare, which would be incredible. And then funding, obviously, as I mentioned, the infrastructure, material resources, computers, projector screen, a printer, which would just really help with administrative operations. The other thing, and these two next points strongly related. The team that run the basic functions of the nonprofit, we're 3 people. I'm the director. We have a coordinator who also serves as the therapist for the women, and then we have an operative assistant. We need support. So to have therapists, mentors for us is important, and we hadn't really taken into account before how as we just kind of supported each other, how important this really was. So I think to have a resource to be able to pay for that constant and consistent support would be very effective and really important in future as we start to grow, even more important. So I'm starting to kind of put into place a plan for that now. Hiring a team leader to moderate activities and meetings within the nonprofit. So sometimes when issues arise between the women, between the team and the women, it's really important to have someone on board. Generally, it's the coordinator, but in future, I would like to have someone external who we can actually bring in to moderate the situations that are going on, just to have a neutral presence, a bit like an HR person, to I guess be a neutral and calming presence and facilitate the discussion that is had, and then and then resources to communicate Adelante Mujer at a different scale in order to generate more support and recognition. So that's about making Adelante Mujer visible, both internally and on a national and international level. And lastly, the point about the seed capital, which I mentioned earlier on, would be fantastic for the women who are graduating from the program. Okay, so those are how we can overcome these challenges, which some of the points we're already working on. Some of them are a little bit kind of long-term plans. So okay, let's go on to the next slide. So how can you help? If you feel inclined to get in touch and have something to do with the nonprofit, volunteering, we have volunteers who come out for 2 weeks to 6 months to help with different aspects of the nonprofit. Some are more kind of interested in gardening and agriculture, and we kind of work with them in the vegetable garden with the gardening. Others are graphic designers, so we work with them with the designs of different documents. This presentation, for example, was put together by one of our volunteers who's here at the moment. So there's a series of activities and responsibilities that we can give to our volunteers. Donating, obviously, always helpful. Becoming a corporate sponsor, which is something that I would corporate sponsor or corporate responsibility sponsor, which is something that I'm interested in strengthening over the next few years, so that we can overcome the challenges that I just mentioned, but on a kind of, instead of the sporadic nature of donations, we can kind of rely on a consistent income from those corporate sponsors. So I can work with that with a long-term plan, and then spreading the word. So just talking about what we do obviously always helps. Generally how we've grown over the last few years, and seems to be working. So I think that's about all I wanted to mention. I hope that that you enjoyed the presentation, that it sparked some curiosity, and I would be open to to answering any questions that you might have, which is what the next slide says. Thanks, guys, for your time. I'm really grateful to have the chance to share this with you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It has been really interesting and it's really delightful to hear all what you have been doing there and all the work that you have been doing with the community in Bolivia, in Cochabamba specifically. I'm open now the session for questions. As always, you can raise your hand and I can give you the mic, or you can send your questions through the Q&A. I will be waiting a little bit, but once again, thank you. Kate, you have the privilege now, so go ahead, please.
Straight in. I'm wondering, I mean, I know you feel there's a lot that you would like to sort of finesse in Cochabamba, but would you consider rolling it out to other cities or other regions? I'm wondering how that would work exactly. I think you might. No, go on.
Yeah, I think the priority at the moment is getting the work we do in Cochabamba to a stage where it is replicable, because at the moment I feel that there is a lot to be improved, not necessarily with the content of the program, but with the systems and protocols that are in place, because I guess the nature of the nonprofit is that it is a kind of grassroots and empirical learn as you go. It's been a bit of an empirical learn as you go process. So we're still learning what protocols and what processes need to be put in place. Once that's kind of more structured, I then believe that there is a possibility that we could roll it out. But I would give it another maybe half year to sort of figure out those processes. And I don't think I would be as enthusiastic to how to phrase this like to do another self-sustaining version of it, because it's a real challenge. So maybe if there was a funding body or there was an institution already existing that wanted to bring the program into their infrastructure, into their nonprofit that they already ran, that might be an easier option for us. So to kind of join forces with other organizations.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. I have Charleston, who is raising his hand, so I'm going to allow and give the mic so you can talk. Go ahead, Charles.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I worked in Cochabamba from 1965 to 1968, I think 69, and I worked with university students. And anyway, and now I'm in Chicago. I'm a Catholic priest, a Dominican, and I work in domestic violence full time in Chicago, both in the Hispanic community and, well, in all communities, all throughout. And I was really fascinated by your presentation and the existence of the program. It's fantastic. I compliment you. It's just wonderful. I did have the two questions I put there, though. One was a lot of the pictures that you showed seem to be younger women. And I'm wondering about the old, like middle-aged 50s and so forth, 60s women, especially those that are more indigenous. I'm wondering how you're reaching them. I'm sure it's a challenge. I remember when I was in Cochabamba how much violence I saw on the streets at night. And a lot of it was with among indigenous folks, the Quechuas. But I was very unaware of domestic violence at that stage in my life. So I've learned an awful lot since then. And I work in a program here in Chicago in the United States. And then my second question was, how do people in the United States make donations? Okay.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks. Yeah. How do we access the indigenous women? Okay. Well, there are. I don't know the exact numbers of the 36 women that we're working with at the moment, but five of them are cholitas. And we how do we access we're not specifically looking for a certain profile of women, so we don't kind of go, okay, we need a specific number of indigenous women, a specific number of it's more a case of reaching out with the different methods that we have. So some of the women have arrived through, as I mentioned, other nonprofits who have deeper methods of identifying women for the programs that they run. For example, Aldeas Infantiles SOS work with children. So they will identify the children that fit the profile that they're looking for to serve them. And then the mothers of those children will obviously also be involved in their interventions and will be some of the time derivados a nuestros programas, so that we can work with the women more deeply. So we do trust that those nonprofits are reaching a broad demographic. And so we kind of based on what they are able to do with their outreach, we're able to include those demographics in our programs. But yeah, I mean, we don't all the programs that we run are in Spanish, for example. All the women who reach us are able to speak Spanish. Some of them speak Quechua as well, but all of them are able to speak Spanish. We don't have the resources to translate everything into Quechua. We just don't at the moment. So we kind of do what we can and work with the demographics that hear about us, and hope that later down the line, in a few years' time, the message and the visibility of the nonprofit does grow, so that by word of mouth we're able to access demographics who might not come across it otherwise. But yeah, I think an important point to mention also, and a recent development, as we started working more with the coordinator, we realized that we didn't have the infrastructure and we didn't have the team or the expertise to deal with extremely urgent cases. So when a woman with an urgent case of violence arrives at our doorstep, we do try and call up our allies and organizations that we have alliances with, like safe houses, for example, who can better help them with what they're going through. And we've decided that we are able to deal with mediana vulnerabilidad. So women who aren't in urgent situations, who have the ability to commit to a process of 8 months. So many of those women have been through episodes throughout their life of domestic violence, gender violence, but they aren't currently living with their aggressor, living with the abuser. So we try and create those alliances so that we have somewhere to send the women when we can't address their urgent circumstances, because we've also got to be kind of take it step by step. We're a small team. and we get very overwhelmed sometimes as it is. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. And with US donations, we do have a PayPal account. If you like, I can put that in the chat box, or contact you directly. Don't know what would work best.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. We are waiting for some more questions. If anybody wants to raise their hands or send the questions through the Q&A, we are open on it.
I've got another question.
Go ahead, please.
You said, Sarah, that the sort of general length of time that the refugees offered to their clients was 3 to 6 months, but what you're offering is, ideally, if they stay the course, 8 months. How does that work? I mean, are there women that you are helping who are in fact living independently, or even living with their abusers still?
Most of the women are either living with their families, live independently. Only about 4 of them who come to our program live in safe houses. Yeah. So yeah, some of them look after houses. There's quite a strong concept here of like house cuidando casas. Some of them do that. Some of them rent very cheaply, and they have an income selling, I don't know, in the market sometimes. It really varies, but if they do need a roof over their heads, we obviously call the safe houses. Some of them also do live with their partners. Some of them do live with their partners, or some of them live with new partners. And in the case that they live with their partners, obviously, like the coordinator knows their circumstances. The coordinator and the coordinator who's also a therapist is in constant communication with them. If it's necessary for them to leave that space, if the relationship is violent, then obviously we have to take action. Sometimes it's the case of emotional violence, where actually emotional abuse, where actually there are steps, there are boundaries that it's possible to start putting in place before it gets to the point in the cycle of violence where there's physical violence. So, you know, there's this that kind of brings me to the point that actually there's a really wide range of circumstances that the women come to the nonprofit with. And it doesn't always have to get to the point of being severe before they seek help. So yeah, but there are also women who've been through situations of attempted femicide. So yeah, there's a really broad range. The interesting thing is that the kind of underlying issue is always the same. You know, that the violence is the tip of the iceberg. The underlying bit of the iceberg is always, you know, there's always similar stuff going on with the women: childhood traumas, childhood abuse. So yeah, we still consider it important, you know, to work with the women who aren't at a level of vulnerability, grado de vulnerabilidad muy alto, to actually avoid later down the line it getting to boiling point, and it having to be severe. So yeah, that answers your question.
Thank you.
Winston, go ahead, please.
Sarah, a fascinating presentation, really very insightful. I've lived in Cochabamba and I have a lot of connections with Cochabamba. I've got some questions, first of all, concerning dealing with legal issues, dealing with the courts, dealing with the police, etc. Do you provide any support in that area at all, or you're not involved? That's one question. The other issue is you made a very small reference to cultivation, to planting and cultivation. Yeah. And have you thought of, I mean, do you run allotments? Do you have these, other women working together as teams, growing things? Is that an activity that they engage in or not? I thought, I think that because Cochabamba is an area where people cultivate, it's quite a tradition, you know, that's with the origin, the sense of being of Cochabamba is about that. It's about cultivation. And so that's very important, I think. I think you answered the other points concerning language, and but I wanted to ask, how has this personally changed you? What effect has this had on you, on your sense of being?
Yeah, thank you for those questions. Especially the third one, that's a good one. So in terms of dealing with police, dealing with legal cases, so we do have lawyers who we partner with, as I mentioned, who help us pro bono. So if there are cases that, okay, hang on, I'm gonna go back. So we have the lawyers that help us pro bono. We also have La Oficina Jurídica de la Mujer, that are a non-profit that work with that basically accompanying, orienting the women with their legal cases. So the La Oficina Jurídica de la Mujer they come to the house. They were coming every week a couple of months ago, but it was too much strain on their time because sometimes not enough women would come. So instead of them coming every week, as soon as there's a woman who has their interview with a coordinator and needs legal support, they will go directly to La Oficina Jurídica de la Mujer, and La Oficina Jurídica de la Mujer will give them the support, the orientation that they need. And as I said, sometimes they don't want to hacer la denuncia, sometimes they do want to, but it's good to just talk about it first. With the police, and our coordinator also has a very lengthy track record of working with SLIM, that's el Servicio Legal Integral Municipal, so she can also give the women some support and orientation as well. But we do try and send them to La Oficina Jurídica so that they have a specific person who's always with them with their case, always accompanying them with their case. In terms of the police, I have had experience with the police with one specific woman's case, well, a couple. It's not the most. It's a little bit frustrating working with the police. Because there's a lot of bureaucratic obstacles, and the judicial system, sorry, the police system is quite inefficient. So I try as much as possible to use our network, the contacts that we have, to push legal cases if we do need to push legal cases, and work more with lawyers than police people. But quite honestly, it depends on the individual case. So if we do need to involve the police, then we will. When there's an urgent situation, or we need to deal with a specific woman's case, it's always, me and the coordinator, what should we do? Who do we call from our network of people? Who's the right person to call about this? Is it a lawyer? Is it even the therapist actually, to have a session with them, because sometimes it's more of an emotional thing than an immediate legal thing. So yeah, it really depends on the situation, but there is a protocol that we know how to follow when there is a legal necessity. Sometimes it's not even una denuncia de violencia. Sometimes it's a case of asistencia familiar, that el agresor no está pagando. In that case, it's a kind of more long-term legal thing. And sometimes it's not even worth pushing, because asistencia familiar is not considered, like, what would you call that in English? Family, the contribution that that is made for the kids, the family pension or asistencia familiar.
Family support?
Family allowance.
allowance.
Family
Yeah.
allowance. It's what the father should give to the mother for their children. Asistencia familiar. Bueno, that I think you understand. I said it in Spanish, but yeah, if the
Maintenance.
okay. If the father isn't paying the maintenance quota that is demanded of him, that then means that a lawyer would need to intervene to push that document through the courts. That can take a long time, and sometimes isn't actually the best solution. Sometimes a better solution is to make sure that without depending on the maintenance allowance coming in from the father, the woman can support her children, and then later pushing the legal document, because it tends to take quite a long time, and there are cases of actually the father being in jail and can't provide the maintenance allowance. But I mean, it's super complicated. But yeah, that's why it's important that we have these alliances with organizations that can work with the women through that for that purpose. With the cultivating, gardening, etc. question, we I've forgotten what the question was now. What was the question, Winston, again? Do we get the women involved in the gardening?
Yeah, and growing and planting as a community. Do you have an allotment? Are you learning how to cultivate? Because that's very, very important. I guess you're in contact with Mother Earth as well, aren't you?
Yeah. So that's one of the elements that we do really like to get the volunteers involved with the women. So the women have a lot of knowledge in cultivation and cómo trabajar la tierra, ¿no? Están muy conectadas con la tierra. And it's one of the things that it's quite nice to get the volunteers involved with. The women teach the volunteers and they work with them. And so at the moment, our veggie garden is producing remolacha, lechuga, cilantro, zapallo, lacayote, y otras cosas más que ahora no me acuerdo. Y tenemos hierbabuena, albahaca. Entonces, yes, we do include the cultivation in our activities. It's not part of the program, although part of the second phase of the Suma Causai, the 8-month program, involves actually like plant. When we talk about dreams, we plant. They each plant their own seed in the allotment that we have, and then they kind of are connected to that seed and the growth of that seed, representing their dream and their plan. So the other side of the answer that I wanted to give was the whole 4 phases of Suma Causai are related to the cultivation process. So the names in Quechua that we give to the 4 phases are actually to sow the seed. Ayinya is the first phase, preparing the soil. Oh God, I wish I don't know. Ayinya, Muhui, which is to sow the seed. Kamai, which is to reap, and Kashai is to reap, and Kamai is to nurture the seed, and Kamai is to reap. So it's kind of based on the process of cultivation, which one of our facilitators actually came up with, gave all the phases the names. It's quite collaborative how we put everything together. Everyone kind of giving contributing their knowledge, their wisdom to the program, but also obviously to the names and to the idea of the process. So that's kind of a few of the ways that we do cultivate, we do involve the women in how we work with the earth. In terms of how the whole process has personally changed me, Oh gosh. See, one second. Yeah. We ended up being in a space that apparently we weren't allowed to be in for this call, so we've been thrown out. But I'll answer this question and then we'll probably move.
The open spaces.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
The members have 5 minutes.
Dale. So for me, every day there's a new challenge. From time management challenges to communication challenges to leadership challenges to cultural challenges. For me, I think honestly that what I've learned, one of the most important things that I've learned throughout this whole process has just been seeing the next step as a small step, as a baby step, taking really small baby steps, and letting it unfold, letting the process unfold, letting it kind of manifest in its own time. I didn't really think that that I'd still be here 5 years later, and I didn't think that the community would have grown. I didn't even know that we would have a community or a program, and so it's just been taking baby steps and addressing the things that need to be done that day, the tasks, and keeping it all in the moment, really. So I guess I've just become, how it's personally changed me, I've just become a little less kind of what's the future going to look like, and a little bit more about today, and what are we going to do today, and what actions can I take today, and really to remember that as a leader, I'm really just here to be of service to the community, and at the moment I'm trying to decentralize as many of the functions of the non-profit as possible. So I'd really like actually the women to be managing the finances of the cooking workshops, of the catering service. I'd like them to make decisions about where that income is going. I'd like to get the community as involved as possible in the decision making, because that's the sustainable way of doing things. So I think, yeah, I think a lot about leadership has been kind of deconstructing these ideas of what it should look like, just doing things in the day, and being of service to the community that has been built. Yeah.
With this, Sarah, I think you are a little bit of time as well. So I want to thank you for your magnificent presentation and these great answers that you provide. We wish you basically all the best, and obviously to all our attendants, we are always try to support all the great work that you are doing at this moment. For my part, all that I'm going to say is this: bravo, good job. And I would like then to Winston and Kate to say the final words, please. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much. I know what a big task it is putting something like this together, and you've got a million other things to do, but you know, our hearts are with you, and if we can help in any more practical way, we will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to, I think it's been very inspiring. I think it's opened our eyes to many of the things that are happening, not only in Cochabamba, but in Bolivia. I just wanted to suggest also that you contact the media, be in touch with local newspapers and the radio stations and TV channels to get coverage. I think that would be helpful for you. It's just a suggestion, but I wish you all the best, and we look forward to well, to see you again sometime. All the best.